On the 9th of August 1945, the Japanese city of Nagasaki was destroyed by a single atom bomb. 70,000 people died. It was a devastation so total that few lived to tell what happened. But of those who did survive, one was Bryer, a Yorkshireman. Another, Arthur Christie, a Londoner. Together, they were in a prison camp in the centre of the city the day the bomb was dropped.
It was just an expanse of burned buildings. The smell around the place was terrible. I remember this awful smell as we walked through the debris to get to the station. People were still dying everywhere. The death rate was very high as we left. And the place was just shattered. I don't think anybody even then realised just what had happened.
The last memories I have was on the train pulling out of Nagasaki once they got the trains working again. And just looking at the ruins, and that's all there was. There was nothing else but just ruins. The whole city was just flat. And that's a picture which has always been with me.
Now, after 39 years, they're about to return. Today, Nagasaki is completely rebuilt. Ironically, in discarding the old ways for the new, the city has embraced America as its model. Today, only the streets remain unchanged.
But we walked up here when we first came into Nagasaki. We walked up here, and then we went into the camp from this road here.
What's on the site now?
It's a sort of a bus depot.
Yeah.
Yes. These gasometers here, when we were up on the hill, I watched those explode.
Nagasaki has raised few monuments to its past. From the destruction, these relics of the old cathedral are all that's been preserved. They stand at ground zero, the centre of the explosion.
500 metres directly above that.
Well, you can imagine.
And this is at ground zero here.
It's a very strange feeling here, isn't it, when you realise that you can't really believe that just up there it laid waste the whole town, something just above our heads.
I thought I'd got over all this business. It never worried me at all since the war. And I stood up there at about 5 o'clock in the morning looking down here. And
Make you think, wouldn't it?
yeah, I suddenly filled right up. Something that I never thought would happen to me again. But you see, you drag all the memories come to the front again of how it was.
Yeah.
And it upset me very much. I never thought that I could be as upset as that.
The new Nagasaki is as crowded as the old. Its destruction took only a small bomb, 1/10 the power of a cruise missile. Even so, just a mile from ground zero, the prisoner of war camp was devastated.
The atomic bomb was something new. I know several cities were bombed out of existence in other parts of the world. But this was just one bomb in one flash, wiped out a city. And something between 70 and 100,000 people. They happened just like that, just like a blink. And when you see something like that, and the city completely wiped out, completely devastated, and the suffering that went on, when I got back to England, I never thought much about it. But over the years, I've often wondered what it was like now. You know, I'd always wanted to come back to see it rebuilt.
After the war, the men felt they could forget about Nagasaki, but later, although in good health, they began to have doubts.
It was only through newspaper reports and news on television we started hearing about people still dying in Hiroshima and Nagasaki through radiation poisoning. I can't quite say when it was, but I know it was a few years afterwards. We were never told anything about it. And then you began to wonder in your mind, you know, well, is it going to affect me at all? Because people who apparently escaped being killed or badly injured during that time were still dying, you know. It was gradually getting to them. And although I've been reasonably healthy compared with some of the people out here, it's always at the back of your mind. It just comes out now and again that, you know, something may happen.
For several years after I got back to England, I believed, as everyone probably must have done that went back to England, that once you were clear of the actual atomic bombing and you appeared sound, to have good health, that this was the end of it. And then as the years went by, I began to hear about radiation sickness and all this sort of thing. But I never had a very real picture of exactly what radiation sickness was or how it could affect you for many years after I came back home to England.
So you never suspected that it might affect you?
I didn't know anything about it. It never entered my head that I could perhaps, within me, have some radiation problems.
In the last, couple of years, I should say, there's been a lot of talk about people who were on the Christmas Islands. These Christmas Islands, when they're experimenting with these nuclear weapons, and there's quite a lot of British and Australian people out there, and they were talking about people who are 5, 10, even 20 miles away, and some of them are now suffering with cancer and bladder trouble, and which I suffer with, by the way. Things like that. And there's never once been any mention of the 16 British prisoners who were less than a mile from the bomb. And if they're suffering, it does make you think.
For their Japanese captors, those fears became reality. Men who stayed in the area later became ill and died from the effects of radiation. Jidao Tajima, stationed at the camp throughout the men's imprisonment, helped rescue prisoners after the bombing. Now, at 64, blind and crippled, he makes his painful way to a ceremony to honor the foreign victims of the bomb.
Now, Mr. Tajima. I hear you've come a very long way to see us. Yeah?
Very nostalgic to see you.
I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Arthur Christie, who was a prisoner of war in the camp with us.
It's a very pleasure for me to meet you again after this long, long time. Very pleased.
He met us off the train and brought us to Nagasaki.
Yeah. I never thought I'd be back here 39 years later.
39年ぶりに戻ってくると夢にも思うね。
いや、私も夢みたいな感じがしますね。
Because he feels like he's in a dream right now.
Apparently he can't see us all now.
No. He's very happy today and to be able to join with you in praying for the repose of the souls of the prisoners who have died.
We would like to request Mr. Ronald E. Bryer to offer a bouquet of flowers in front of the memorial for the victims of the war.
In the city centre, The position of the prison camp is marked by a new bridge, built on the site of the old one. The prisoners were marched over it each day to work.
Now,
Now that's the road we took, didn't it? Round this first one on the left here.
It's a little bit further on.
Yeah.
Because we're actually looking at the prison camp in there, where that white building is there. That was the prison camp.
Yeah.
I worked in this building. There was a bigger building than there then.
And about 200 yards
There was a
along.
moulding shop there that
That's
you
right.
worked in there, and there was a foundry. Mitsubishi Engine Works was there. Those were the buildings. Yes, you see, this was the road we came out of the camp. And there was the camp wall was here, along here, and the entrance to the camp was there in that corner where the guard hut was.
Where those gates are.
Where the gates are.
Now let's find the exact spot, Ron.
Well, the building was there. It was an old red. That's the wall that came down on top of me. It was the red wall was there.
And the shelters were in front of that.
The
weren't they?
shelters
All
were
along
here.
Where these buses were now, we've spent 2 years in that bloody place, you
that
remember?
was the camp. Those were the camp buildings there.
The Mitsubishi shipyards, 4 miles from the camp, dominate Nagasaki. It's a company town. The men forced to work here, weakened by the brutal prison camps of Java, were in no shape to cover the distance from the camp, let alone build ships. In the first 2 months, disease and malnutrition left 100 men dead. For the survivors, 2 years of hard labor lay ahead.
You were riveting there in temperatures of 90 degrees and riveting plates on the tankers, oil tankers, plates about 1 inch thick. And we came off at night with just a khaki jacket and shorts, similar to the type of clothing that the soldiers wear. And as you came home at night, your clothing was white with salt from your perspiration. We slept on a woven straw mattress which came infested with fleas or whatever, and they got into the clothes. And on a very cold morning, it took a lot of effort to take your clothes off and begin to go through them and clean them, and people just began that they just didn't bother. They didn't bother to do this. One of them, he became infested with vermin, and he wouldn't take his clothes off at all. And they began to appear around his collar, and you could see he was in a very bad way, and he was scratching himself and developed sores under his clothes, and he died. He just gave up trying anymore, and the first signs of this was when a person just stopped caring for himself. He stopped cleaning his clothes, and it wasn't very long after that he was dead. The people that died were frequently laid on the end of our bed spaces, waiting to go up to the mortuary for cremation. It was a common whitewood box that was used as a sort of coffin, and they were taken up there, and the bodies were cremated, and the box was brought back again to take other people.
By 1945, the men were too weak to continue at the shipyards. As more men died, the war's final chapter was being written 5,000 miles away in America. On July the 16th, the world's first nuclear test in the New Mexico desert proved that America's atom bomb would work. It had been developed secretly with British help. A presidential committee decided that the bomb should be used against Japan as soon as possible. The target should be a war plant in a densely populated area. No warning should be given. On the Pacific island of Tinian, the bombs intended for Japan were being prepared. This one, a plutonium bomb nicknamed Fat Man, would be used on Nagasaki. On the morning of August the 6th, the world's first nuclear weapon was used against Hiroshima. In an instant, 70,000 people died. Plans for a second nuclear attack were now stepped up. On the target list, Nagasaki. On the morning of August the 9th, the B-29 bomber Boxcar found its primary target, Kokura, hidden by cloud, and so turned toward Nagasaki. The bomb was dropped at 2 minutes past 11.
I came back in here about 10 o'clock. And the shelters had been badly damaged, this one here particularly, on August the 1st by high explosive. And I was given the job of getting into the shelter and shoring the roof up with various pieces of timber. And I was down in the shelter doing that when I heard the sound of plane engines. And as I heard the noise of the engines, I looked out through this square hole up into the sky up there, and I saw these parachutes high in the sky, the blue sky, pretty much brighter than it is today. And I watched them for a bit, and I just thought, well, someone had bailed out the plane or something like that. And then as I watched, I heard this tremendous crescendo as the noise of the engines increased. And I looked away, and as I looked away, there was this tremendous violet, white, blue flash, almost liquid in intensity. Not a momentary thing, it seemed to last several seconds, right outside the hole here, just above my head. The shelters, we were crouched in the shelters, they weren't big enough to stand in. And there was a tremendous vibration along with it, not an explosion at all. And then as the vibration continued, the wall of this building the brick came down, and I remember bricks pouring through the hole and thundering on the top of the shelter, and the weight of the shelter gave way. And this weight came down onto my back. And at the hole here, there was a pair of legs appeared in among the brickwork of someone trying to get into the hole who couldn't get there in time. And I think I must have been struck on the head by one of the bricks, because when I came out I had a mark on my head here, because momentarily everything went black. And I was lying down there for, must only have been seconds. And then I came to, or appeared to come to, everything was black, there was nothing to identify with at all. And I thought I was dead.
The roof came in and I was buried under there. I'm not quite sure how long I lay there, but I started moving around and I realised that I wasn't dead, although I thought that this was it. I thought to myself, well, this is how I'm going to go. And I was really convinced that that was the end. But at that particular time, I remember I wasn't scared or frightened. It was too sudden, it happened too sudden. And then I started to realise I was alive and that I could move about a bit. I started shouting, screaming for help.
And then I found I could move a little bit. And I began to move my way through these loose bricks and things here. And I got past the legs of whoever was underneath the pile of bricks coming onto here, and I got out, and I stood out as I'm here now. Now out here was, there were swirls of black smoke. You couldn't see very well at all as soon as I came out. And there was black smoke and debris, everything around here. And then as I stood here, I couldn't really believe what my eyes were telling me had happened, because there was a factory there, painted black. And it must be 40 or 50 feet high, and it was gone. There was just a skeleton there. There was a close-boarded fence all around this yard with barbed wire on the top, and that was gone. And then the guard room was just behind me over there on the left-hand side. And that was on fire. Everything was on fire in the yard here. And then as I stood here, suddenly from out of there, which was a huge complex in which we used to work, there was about 100 Japanese came running out of there, climbing over the debris and everything else, right through here. They passed me all around here. They were all naked. Hair was gone, and the clothing had obviously been on fire. I saw one or two of our own people here around with their clothing on fire. And these Japanese ran round me here, and they were making for the hill over there at the back. And the thing that sticks in my mind even now is that they were running like they were panting like animals. But nobody made a sound except for this very hard breathing. As they run like wild men through here. And the skin, they were stripped completely of skin. Some of the skin had, these blisters had burst. Some had blisters, huge blisters from the hands hanging down. And some of the blisters had burst. And they were just streamers of skin hanging from them as they ran away through there, making the same sound.
Whereas before you could only see a few yards around you without a wall or a building of some sort, there was nothing. You could just see right the way across to the hills, the other side, down the end of the valley. It was just flat. There was nothing. It was as though somebody had just come through with a broom and just swept the whole lot away. And then we started hearing shouts and badly injured people lying around. And we started rummaging through what was left of the building, pulling out injured. And quite a lot of dead people outside, obviously Japanese civilians. And the sights I saw, that was the first sight I saw, was a Japanese civilian that was laying in the ground dead. I just stood, I just couldn't believe what I saw. The skin was just peeled from his face, and any exposed part of his body was just sort of wiped away, as though you got over the skin and just sort of peeled it off. But there's one spot on the way across. There's a big open space. And there were literally hundreds of men, women and children just lying there, just lying on the flat. Some were dead, some were very, very badly burnt, injured, little children. I remember I had a water bottle with me, and we emptied that water bottle. We wanted to get the little kids to drink. This was Jeff Carter. He didn't say anything, didn't stop us. That's all we could do, and we just walked on, and we met up with the other prisoners the other side.
The buildings were just collapsed everywhere, and there were many, many people trapped in the buildings. You could hear them, as I ran through there, I could hear them all crying out from the buildings. And the buildings were all on fire. The Japanese that you saw, they were able-bodied in the sense that they could see and they could run. But there must have been many, many thousands trapped in the buildings that just couldn't get out at all. The people that we had with us, the person that I was with in particular that was blind, of course, someone was there to lead him by the hand. And the burn then, the burn at that particular time, it just looked like a deep white burn over his face. And as the time went by, as the evening came on, of course that had swollen to, it was completely disfigured. You couldn't recognize any features at all, and his ears had swollen to 3 or 4 times the normal size. And the suffering he must have been going through was indescribable.
I mean, obviously we didn't know anything about atomic bombs, and we couldn't understand what it was that had caused so much carnage, you know. I mean, it was terrible. And it was just one explosion, just one bomb. That's what amazed us. We couldn't make it out.
actual pictures of the atomic bomb obliterating Nagasaki. Down among the ruins, Emperor Hirohito surveyed the smashed wreckage of Japan's industrial cities before his final decision to surrender. Captured Japanese newsreel pictures show Nippon's all-highest getting an object lesson in defeat.
In Nagasaki, 70,000 died in the devastation. With the prisoner of war camp reduced to rubble, the British servicemen escaped the inferno by climbing the surrounding hills.
Yes, well, the bomb went off just in the middle distance there,
Yeah.
as we're looking at it now. And our camp there, it was just a smooth heap of rubble right away through there. Right away through, as far as your eye can see here. With just odd pieces sticking up here and there. But when I came through there just wasn't a road of any description. It was just a complete mass of just tangled rubbish, wires, poles. Well, you couldn't identify a road at all. And we just came straight across the middle of it. You could come and climb straight across the middle.
On August the 9th each year, the people of Nagasaki gather to commemorate those killed by the bomb. The day after the bombing, the city was still ablaze. From their refuge on the hillside, the British prisoners of war were now led back down into the burning ruins.
Terribly hot there. Many of the fires were still smoking. And I collected, we had to get some cover for our own people who were injured and burned. And we collected sheets of corrugated iron that had been blown from the factory cladding, and hammered it out into something like a sheet. And from these sheets we made makeshift shelters to keep the sun from the people who were badly burned. We were reduced to finding rags from anywhere we could find them, bodies or whatever, any piece of rag, in the case of boiling it, in the open and just laying the rags on the wound, and then finding some more to replace them, probably an hour or 2 hours later, and boiling the rags that had been used. And of course the flies were getting all over the wounds, and of course it wasn't long before the wound became maggot infested. And this was one of the biggest problems. We didn't have any medical supplies of any description at all. Now these people were lying under shelters made of tin shelters, in a temperature of over 90 degrees. And to this temperature that was adding the heat of the masonry everywhere around. And the suffering of those people, I think, it couldn't be described. Then I was put to work, taking bodies out of the factory building, or buildings close to the factory buildings, bodies that were not completely burned from buildings that had been probably blown down and partially burned. And we put them on piers of timber. We salvaged timber beams, again, from just outside the fired area. And we probably each evening had about 20 piers with 20 to 25 bodies on each one. And we lit them at night, and they burned through the night. And then in the morning we started again, gathering bodies again. It was an appalling business. The bodies were, many were completely penetrated by debris. Some of the limbs were away from the body.
I know one of my jobs, a very unpleasant job, but it had to be done. More unpleasant, I say, because it was a fellow prisoner. And I and another one of our chaps, we wrapped his body up and erected a big pile of wood, put his body in it and burned him. And we stayed with it until it had completely burned. And we pricked his ashes up, and he gave us a little white wooden box to put wash ashes we put in, and we handed them back to the Japs.
What to you was the worst single moment in this period?
I don't really know. I don't really know. I don't think I ever really, when we were collecting corpses and burning them, I don't think that really registered. I can't think of anything really very much worse than that.
Outside the city, schools became makeshift hospitals. Many of the victims who'd survived their injuries now died from radiation sickness. 5 months later, the aftermath was recorded by a United States War Department film crew led by this man, Herbert Susan.
The hospital that made the greatest impression on me, that never left my mind all my life, was a place called the Omura Naval Hospital. And the burn victims, which was a new kind of victim of bombing too, the burn victims from atomic burns, which are much different than regular burns in a fire, were brought to that hospital. And it seemed as if their skins had simply melted and frozen. And you could see on the bodies of people the exact patterns of what they had been wearing at the time.
Senji Yamaguchi was 14 at the time. His burns produced keloids, a type of scar tissue common among victims of the atom bomb.
At first, when the keloids healed, they are bright red. When children came near me, they would burst into tears. I felt as though everyone was staring at me, especially young people. After graduation, I was so ill with the keloids that I couldn't get a job. I had no prospect of getting married either. Finally, at the age of 23, I lost my desire to live and tried to commit suicide by cutting my wrist with a razor. The scars are still visible.
Did other survivors injured like yourself, were they also driven to that kind of despair?
私の友人で高校生の2人の男の子を残して
I had a friend with keloids, a mother of 2 teenage sons who committed suicide last year. She was an attractive woman, but she ended up killing herself because of the keloids.
To date, Senji Yamaguchi has had 8 operations for his keloid scars, the last one a year ago. Tsuyo Kataoka was a young woman at the time of the explosion. Her facial burns also left keloid scar tissue. It meant years of surgery.
I had a bulging keloid that made it look as though I had 2 lower lips. I had an operation to cut it away because I couldn't open my mouth properly. The skin was pulling down from my eyes. When I had a drink, it would drip out of the side because my lips didn't fit together. The operation made opening my mouth a bit easier. I despaired the first time I looked into a mirror. I couldn't keep it in my hand and smashed it onto the floor. I was a young woman of 24 when the bomb was dropped, and I had so many dreams for the future. But the atomic bomb snatched them all away. It was torture to go out with my monster face. I don't know how many times I cried and wished I'd been killed when I thought about going out into society again. I hated war and cursed the bomb.
Sumitoru Taniguchi was 16. He was delivering mail near the prisoner of war camp. Recently, he underwent the latest in a series of operations for radiation-induced skin cancer. Today, he's come to the atom bomb hospital for an examination.
I was burned from behind by the fierce heat rays and thrown off the bicycle onto the pavement by the blast. It was so strong, it blew down the iron pillars of the factories. I was lying on the road, and I thought I was going to die. But I told myself that I mustn't. As the blast died away, I stood up and noticed that the skin on my left arm was hanging down like an old rug from the shoulder to the fingertips. I put my hand around to feel my back and found that it was burnt and slimy.
This film of Mr. Taniguchi in the hospital was taken by the Americans. So that the burns to his back could be treated, he had to lie face down on a bed continuously for 1 year and 9 months.
There was nothing but pain and agony. I had no energy to think about whether I was going to live or die. Because I was lying face down constantly for that long period, the flesh on my chest just rotted away.
I thought it was the most terrible thing I had ever seen. I couldn't believe that this man, this boy, rather, at that point would live. And I thought we were simply photographing a medical record which we put down, and nobody expected him to live. And it's the most amazing story of courage and somehow man's inner strength to survive, that this particular person is alive even at this time.
Today, Herbert Susan himself is a dying man. His film of the Nagasaki bomb victims, kept secret by the US government for 37 years, was released only after a campaign by him for it to be made public. But now, he believes he too is a victim of the bomb. Doctors have diagnosed lymphoma, a form of cancer caused by radiation. In the mountains above Nagasaki, a special hospital is home for some of the other victims of the bomb, those left sick, homeless and alone. Here, they will live out their days, those suffering from the long-term effects of the bomb. In Nagasaki, 2/3 of all survivors die of cancer. Others, with cataracts, blood disease and birth defects, will never recover. Zinichi Hashimoto, now 38, was a month-old fetus in the womb when the bomb was dropped. He was born with severe brain damage and has never walked. Ayako Morita is 55 and has a chronic wasting disease. She was at work when the bomb exploded.
I went back to my house, but there was no one there. Half the house was burned and the other half completely destroyed. I walked and walked and finally went to an air raid shelter. Many of my neighbors were there, but they were beyond recognition. The lips were hanging down, they were bleeding, and the skin on their bodies was burned off. My father, mother, and younger sister were among them. Because of the after effects of the bomb, my body became twisted, little by little. It just went opposite to my wishes and became all deformed. Now, I can't do anything for myself.
A 250,000 died in the atomic bombings of August 1945. In Nagasaki, the deaths coincided with the season of religious festivals, still held today, to honor the spirits of the dead. A new cathedral now stands where the old one was destroyed. Although all around is rebuilt, on August the 9th each year, the Catholics of Nagasaki march, as if to underline the irony of the American bomb that wiped out the largest Christian community in Japan.
One evening I was sitting outside the huts quite alone by the side of this little stream, and there was an old Japanese soldier standing on the other side of the stream, and he looked around to make sure that nobody was around, his own people. It was under a very strict regime. And then he crossed the river, and I knew when he was coming he was going to tell me something very important, and he just said, "Shensu aware," which means war's finished. And then he made a gesture to me like this, and Hansho, which meant that if his Hansho or his sergeant or whoever knew about it, he would be in trouble, he'd be beaten. And you dare not believe this sort of thing. After our experiences, you just dare not believe it. I went back into the hut and I told the rest of the lads what he said. But none of us dare believe it. I think if you'd allowed yourself to believe this, well then, if it doesn't happen, you're destroyed. And we daren't believe it. And next morning, a Japanese officer came into the room with an interpreter. And he said that the Japanese had agreed with the Americans to cease hostilities, that he was taking his men out of the camp. There was a hut just across the way full of arms and ammunition, mount our own guard for our own protection. And that was it. He saluted and off he went, marching down the hill back to Nagasaki, and we never saw him again. We were entirely alone.
We decided, or these 6 of us, the English chaps, decided that we weren't going to wait for the Americans. We were going to leave on our own, which we did. And one day we just packed what stuff we had in a bag and we left. I know Ron was one of them, myself, 4 others. And we travelled down to we walked down to the station actually, which by then they'd cleared the line.
But only in as much as debris had been just pulled away from the sides of the track. And one wondered whether even the train could get through it. The debris was piled so closely to the track that one wondered how the train was going to come through. But it did, it came through. And we just got on board and sat there.
Well, the last view we had as we pulled out, it was just a very, very sad sight to see a city been flattened like that and so many dead.
I consider that I was very fortunate to go back to England. How many people would like to have everything destroyed that they have? Homes, lives, property, and have to start from scratch and probably spend 40 years of their life getting back to where they were at the time of the atomic bomb? I certainly wouldn't.